to Flow-etry Academy. This program was made possible by a grant from Lift Every Voice. Lift Every Voice is presented by the Library of America in partnership with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the Emerson Collective, with additional partnership from Ball State University's Office of Diversity and Inclusive Excellence. Along with this program, we would like to recommend this book called African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song by Kevin Young. This is a Library of America anthology. I am Tanisha Harris, one of the organizers of this program. I am also the supervisor for the Connection Corner Technology Branch of Muncie Public Library. Another of our organizers is Richard Bowman, who is a Ball State University grad student, who has an immense love of poetry and will be taking us off tonight. Richard, go ahead.
Hello. Richard Bowman, wonderful, lovely, and excited student at Ball State University, and a lover of poetry. Today is a very special day because we have our first guest poet today, someone who is just special in so many ways. She's an amazing writer. She has a beautiful soul, and I'd probably say the best way to describe her is she just oozes chaotic good energy. Like chaotic but good energy. She's a dear friend of mine, a phenomenal poet. You are going to love her and the amazing things she has to teach you today. My friend, my soul sister, Sierra.
Hi, thank you for that super warm introduction, Richard. As mentioned, I'm Sierra Diane. I'm going to go ahead and gear up our PowerPoint today so we can go ahead and get our lesson started. All right, amazing. So my lesson for y'all today is going to be on extended metaphors, or meaning what you say without saying what you mean. So I kind of want to open up with just a poem that I really enjoy. It is by Anthony McPherson. And to start off, I just want you guys to kind of watch, and then I'll kind of ask you a few questions afterwards to see anything you notice, any reactions, any thoughts that you have on it. So I'm going to gear that up now.
All Lives Matter, 1800s edition. Just because I own slaves doesn't mean I'm racist. I don't even see color. You're racist for being slaves. My closest friends are house Negroes. Look, I didn't ask to have all this cotton. It's not my fault that the cotton is profitable. Don't blame me for something my grandfather's grandfather planted. And if cotton is so bad, why are you wearing it? Don't act innocent. This is the fabric of all our lives. You know what really just shines my shoes? You can give birth to a light-skinned child and everything's fine. But I put on a little bit of blackface. Oh no, that's racist. How? Blackface comes off. Your white face is forever. This is not the dream that Abraham Lincoln gave speeches for. Racism ended with the 3/5 compromise. Everyone is equal. We have a black overseer. Slavery is a choice. If you didn't want to get locked up, you should have kept running after we captured your wife. I mean, like, come on. Make good decisions or face the consequences. Blacks are 99% more likely to try and escape north. That's not racist. That's just a fact. When will you people realize underground railroads only create racial divide? And why? We're all red on the inside. Look at your brother's body. Rope doesn't make his neck any different than mine. My accountant hung himself, so we're all struggling with something. Don't judge a book that you're not allowed to read. My house is like 2 stories tops. The real masters live in mansions. I'm a slave like you. Only through love and working together can we get our emancipation. Free the people? How about we the people? Black lives matter? How about all lives matter?
All right, so that was All Lives Matter by Anthony McPherson. And just to start off, if there's any folks in here who have just any initial reactions or thoughts that they have on the poem, or that they want to pop in the chat if they don't feel like speaking. Yeah, so just what are your initial thoughts when you saw this poem and when you heard it and when you watched it?
I loved it. It says a lot. It says so many things people think may not say, or they say, but they don't realize what they mean. I really I enjoyed that one. It's making me think. That's what it's doing. So.
Yes, amazing. Thank you for that. Yeah, it definitely it says a lot. And McPherson, he is so expressive with what he's doing. He's so expressive, he's so animated. You see that you're kind of just drawn in initially with everything that he's saying. And it's something that really makes you think a little bit. And I would be curious to hear any folks' thoughts, either out loud or in the chat, if they want to share. If not, that's fine. What do you think that this poem is trying to say? What message did you get from this poem, or what did you feel like the poet was trying to convey with what he was doing in this poem?
If you don't mind me throwing in some additions here too. I mean, I'm really glad to just hear this poem again. I love that poem so much. I mean, just the lens which he used was so powerful, because the whole time you're just making comparisons between that quote unquote 1800s edition and modern times, what you hear today versus like the context he gives you then. And a lot of it is, I mean, really the same. It's all about deflection. It's all, hey, it's not my fault. Like, it's not my problem. I'm not the problem here. And that's really most of the message, is just people saying, hey, I shouldn't have to feel bad because I'm privileged. I shouldn't have to feel bad because I am not oppressed. And it's it translates so well in the poem.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
translates so well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Richard. Yeah, it's a thing where he never explicitly says exactly what he's trying to convey, but you still feel it nevertheless. You can tell, even like the audience feels it in the recording. You hear like the guy in the end screaming like, "Well done," because everything that he's saying, the comparison that he's making, very much hits, and it's very impactful as he's teeing this conversation up, how he intros it with All Lives Matter 1800s edition, and then from there he's in this space of using phrases that you might hear now, or that you feel like folks are thinking now, but applying it to 1800 situations and the lifestyle around it, as opposed to modern day. And in that, you can really feel and see and kind of engage critically with this concept of progress, and whether or not we've really come as far as we say we have, even just with the usage and the occurrence of this phrase, all lives matter. So it is definitely something that I think is super impactful in what he does. And what he's doing is he's using a comparative literary device and using it throughout. But I want to, before I get into more about the extended metaphor and what that is and utilizing it, I want to talk a little bit just about some basic comparative literary devices in general. So the two kind of main ones that you often hear about, the basic literary comparisons, are the simile and the metaphor. And breaking it down and simplifying it, a simile is a phrase that usually uses the words like or as that compares one thing with another thing to make a description more vivid. So an example of a simile is her smile was like the sun. On the other hand, a metaphor is a word or phrase that takes on the meaning of something else to compare one thing with another. So her smile is the sun, as opposed to her smile was like the sun. Can any folks in the chat think of some other examples of a metaphor that they want to type into the chat box? Another example of a metaphor that you might be able to work with might be, let me think. Time is a thief, right? Kind of the simile of that might be time is like a thief, but if you're going on a metaphorical sense, time is a thief. Another one in the chat. The flow of the poem was butter. Absolutely. That's a really good one. Thank you for that one in the chat box. So that's our kind of basic literary devices. So expanding on that a little more, we have the extended metaphor. And another one in the chat. That's a nice one, Maya. She cried a river. Nice. So an extended metaphor is a version of a metaphor that continues over multiple lines, sentences, or paragraphs of literature. Extended metaphors typically build upon simple metaphors or comparisons by using figurative language and more varied and descriptive comparisons. So you see it throughout a body of work as opposed to just within one line, or having kind of a throwaway line and then moving on with the poem, or having a throwaway metaphor and then moving it differently. And that's thinking of an extended metaphor in very broad terms. You can get into different specifications or nuances between extended metaphors when you're thinking of analogies and comparisons, or if you're thinking about allegory. Different nuances like that, but looking at the broadness of an extended metaphor, that long form comparison. So what I want to do now is give you another example of an extended metaphor from some of my work, actually. And I'm going to go ahead and not only read it aloud, but share screen so you guys can kind of look at it and read along if you'd like to get an idea of what it looks like. Perfect. So this is a poem that I wrote a few years back, and it's called Medusa. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of read it aloud for you guys. When I was 11, I wanted to be an artist. Thought I could make myself my muse, but everyone was always telling me how to make my masterpiece. Do not beam like that, Sierra. Smile small and confined, so the only joy on your face is what others might get from looking at it. Sit up straighter. When you slouch like that, your stomach pouches out and you can tell you carry the ocean inside of it. This world does not like girls that can drown them. I did my best to oblige, tried to fit my entire being into a compact mirror. Let the boys in my class eclipse me with their asteroid belted out answers. I thought I had all the answers. Until I was 14. And a girl said to me, "You are so ugly. If I looked at you hard, I bet I'd turn to stone." And for the rest of the year, when she said my name, all I heard was Medusa. And the boys in my class got a little too good at playing God, would command me to smile, offended if I wouldn't, but my lack of smile was not meant to be mean. I mean, what's meaner than a girl who knows what she means? And the echoes of the archetypes they expected me to be battled inside my body and bred shadows under my eyes the color of war. So I said, fine then, make me Medusa, but do not look at me in the eye or you will be stuck. I'll sneer at how struck you are by the fact that I don't care about being ugly. Make you listen stone-faced to my soliloquies. I never felt more beautiful than when I decided I wasn't. Maybe Medusa liked her hair wild as snakes, a mane of monstrous fangs hissing, don't touch me. Maybe Medusa started turning people to stone the day she realized she did not owe the world her smiles, when she rejected society's small-mindedness of what warrants giving a woman some respect. Maybe this is how Medusa broke the seal of her fate. Maybe this is how I sealed my fate. When I was 17, a boy said, "You would look so hot if it wasn't for your face." And he instantly became Perseus. I watched him sever my head from my body, swinging his sentence like a sword, but Perseus left my body for Pygmalion to pick up. I met him and learned porcelain is forged from fire too. He contoured my sneer until my cheekbones looked chiseled and cheery, whittled away the seas inside of me until I was hollow enough to be ashamed about my appearance. And finally, I was a masterpiece, like a Grecian epic, the tale of the heroes who saved the Gorgon girl from a hideous fate. But if you don't know that this is a tragedy, then you haven't been paying enough attention. So that was my poem, Medusa. Something I think that is striking and interesting about extended metaphors is the way they allow you to kind of live inside of that metaphor. So you're able to expound a little bit more on it in general. It's almost like a certain amount of world building that you have when you're able to kind of sit with the metaphor and explore what's around it and what's happening beyond it. So that's something that is really helpful when doing that. And I'm going to go ahead and exit full screen so I can share my PowerPoint again. And what I want to do actually is I want to play a little bit with some of the metaphors that were dropped in the chat. But I first want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits that you think might come from an extended metaphor versus one that is a little more one-off. If anyone has any thoughts on what might be an advantage of extending or expounding upon a metaphor rather than leaving it kind of in short form, feel free to bring that into the space or drop it in the chat, or if not, that's totally fine as well.
I think having extended metaphor really, like, a metaphor can be interpreted many ways, and I feel like when you extend it, it like shows you how you want it to be viewed. So yeah, I like that.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And thank you for bringing that into the space, Maya, where even thinking about some of the example metaphors that we had or that I listed, they can be very almost cliched at time, you know, like her smile is the sun. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people can often use that, but extending on it allows you to make the metaphor work for you. It can be subversive sometimes. So it might be that her smile is the sun, her teeth were searing rays of light. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of subverts it rather than using it in a way that might be typical or in a way that is what we typically think of when we think of that metaphor. So that is one of the main benefits of extending upon a metaphor. And then there are a few others as well I'm going to share with you guys. So another benefit that I think is really great when you're extending and expanding upon metaphors and comparisons is the complexity that it can offer you. So extended metaphors can allow you to talk about something that can be complex or abstract in a way that's a lot more accessible or straightforward to folks. You can talk about things that you find hard to find the words to by applying your own words and language to it. Another thing from a writer point of view that can be helpful is thinking about extended metaphors and what that does with language in terms of distance, right? So extended metaphors can make it a lot easier to explore topics that are a bit more difficult for you, or that might hit closer to home, that are more personal, but that you want to explore, but you feel either uncomfortable doing it in a way that's so straightforward. Um, by giving you that distance, by losing some of that explicitness, and by taking something else to compare that to. So that's another advantage of it. On the flip side of that, though, sometimes you do lose some of that specificity, and sometimes you can risk there being a disparity in what folks understand, right? So your understanding of something and a situation might get muddled in the metaphors that you use. So thinking about the benefits of it, but also on the flip side of that. And then the last kind of benefit I think of when I look at extended metaphors and comparisons is how compelling they can be. Extended metaphors, they can often make for really great arguments or assertions. We kind of saw that with McPherson's poem, and that is his metaphor, and he didn't even really he pretty much teed it up, I think, with the title, and then kind of lived in that world of the metaphor for the duration of the poem. But it allowed for a different kind of perspective. It can be a really powerful tool in bridging understanding. So those are some really good usages of an extended metaphor. So what I want to go ahead and do now, keeping an eye on time, we're a little ahead of time. That's amazing. I want to go ahead and give y'all some time to write a little bit and to try out using extended metaphors. So I have a prompt for you, and then I have an alternative prompt for folks who might not be feeling the initial prompt. So my prompt for you is to write a poem that is an extended metaphor. You can use some of the examples that we talked about or that were listed in the chat, or you can use something that is completely different. And keeping in mind that extended metaphors don't typically always have to be a duration of the work, but I want to go ahead and try and see how far you guys could take a metaphor and live in a world. And noting that can also be challenging, especially if your creative juices aren't necessarily flowing. We have an alternative prompt, and that is to just try and stretch your metaphor muscles a little bit, right? If you can't write an entire poem that is metaphorical or comparative, try seeing if you can take a metaphor and see how long you can run with it, right? So instead of making it maybe a line in a poem, seeing if you can make it a stanza or 2 stanzas. So go ahead and try to stretch that metaphor a little bit for as long as it works, use it for as long as it's useful, and when it isn't, go ahead and throw it away and think of another metaphor and pick up where you left off. To try again, and so on, as you try to stretch those metaphorical muscles. Any questions from folks so far? Feel free to put them in the chat, or you can always message me privately if you have another question. Awesome. So let me take a look at the time. It is 5:25. I'm going to go ahead and give us roughly about 15-ish minutes to go ahead and do a bit of free writing. I'll put on a little instrumental music, not too loud, just so you can have that as kind of background as you go forward and you write. And there might have been some folks that had joined a little later, so I will pop up the prompts back too. And feel free to either put in the chat or message me privately if you have any questions, all right? Go ahead and go forth and write. All right, we are at time for our free writing. So how did that feel for folks? Did we feel good? Did we feel bad? Did we find anything? Did we write anything? Did we stare at the page for 10, 15-ish minutes? I see some
I
smoke.
felt
I got my creative
pretty
juices going. My bad. Go ahead.
I felt pretty good about it. It was definitely difficult. I've never really worked with metaphors much. It's just definitely not my expertise. So
Nice, nice. Well, I thank you all for taking the time to do that, to work in the new. Same with you, Tabitha. Yeah, so flexing a new muscle for some folks took a minute, but I did write something. I hope if you have something on your page, you wrote something, and that's amazing. So nice job. Would anyone like to share what they wrote or some of what they wrote? Everyone's like, oh no, that's the worst part. All right, well, no worries. You definitely do not have to share if you don't want to, but that window/door is open for y'all to, if that is something that you choose to do or you think later on, maybe I will share some of it. Feel free to let me know in the chat or raise your hand, and we'd absolutely love to hear anything that you wrote. I'm curious, you guys can let me know in the chat. Did a lot of you folks find yourself doing the first prompt where you tried to write an entire poem that was an extended metaphor, or were more folks kind of veering towards the alternative prompt where it was just kind of stretching a metaphor for as long as they felt that it was useful and then moving on to another?
the second prompt was easier for me. I definitely stuck with like a main theme, but it was easier for me to like come up with more and then extend on those.
Absolutely. That completely makes sense for sure. Alternative one, same. Yeah. We were feeling a lot more comfortable with less of a commitment of a whole poem. That's understandable. That's real. That's exciting. I'm curious how far y'all were able to get while you were writing and while you were extending that. I know, Maya, you mentioned working with a specific theme, so not necessarily an entire extended metaphor, but living inside a theme. So I think that's really good. I still think that is interesting. I feel like I love a good theme for these. So nice job. So the next thing that I want to kind of move on to is more of a performance aspect. So there's different, obviously, like ways of doing poetry. There's the just written work. There is sometimes performing in almost more of like a coffee shop way where you're kind of sitting and reading, and then there's more of the slam aspect. And we saw with the example poem that was definitely living in the slam realm, where it was like high energy. It was very much playing to an audience. So I think that's something that can be really helpful when you're performing is body language. And let me actually pop up my fun slide for that one again. So on the performance end, we have body language. So when you are performing a poem or when you're speaking a poem, there's a lot of things that go into it. There's the actual poetry work, and then there's your inflection, what you're doing with your voice. But I really want to focus a little bit on just some awareness of movement and what you're doing with your body. And a lot of times it can be a bit difficult, especially if you're not used to being in front of an audience, if you're a little wary of your work, and especially because poetry can be a very personal thing. So it can be really difficult for you to want to be on a stage and to kind of put yourself out there and to kind of use your body to be expressive and emotive. But at the same time, there's a lot of benefits of it. I think one, even just on the personal end and on the stress end, is when you're using your body language, whether it's something that you think up or it's just you kind of moving as you see fit and as you're going and as you're feeling it, is that it can sometimes actually help with nerves because it gives you something to do with your body. So you're not shaking, so you're not just fidgeting. So you look and feel less awkward when you're doing the movement aspect of it. I think another thing about body language that can be really powerful is how you can get a little bit of, intention across as you're moving your bodies. I don't know if you notice this whole thing. I am a hand talker. I talk with my hands a lot. And a lot of people that talk with their hands, it's an expressive thing, and it adds something, it adds a little, even this, it adds like something you're looking for. So whenever you're moving your body, regardless of whether you're meaning to or not, and you're reading a poem, you're going to be moving and using your body in some way. So being able to have that awareness of body movement. And I actually think what I'm going to do to demonstrate, instead of going over the previous poem that I had and adding body language, is that I'm going to perform another poem that I have. So kind of mixing it in a little bit to kind of demonstrate, because I feel like this poem is one where I really enjoy being expressive and I enjoy using my body to convey it. So I'm going to adjust and I'm going to perform. And if you want, you can tell me a few things afterward that you noticed. But then after that, we're going to have you guys try practicing a little bit of body language with your poem. Everyone's like, oh no, I didn't know I'd have to move today. All right, give me just a sec.
When I went back to private, I wanted it on everyone.
All right, awesome. Doing a little standing up and adjustment. So this poem that I have, I wrote a couple of years ago. It feels like a long time ago, but it probably wasn't. I actually performed this a few times at a few different slams, and I'm gonna go ahead and do it for y'all. My sassiness speaks. I was born from the back end of someone else's awkward silence, hurtled over the lump in their throat and said, bubblegum pop, neck roll, eyes like dice, yeah, girl. And the people around me, they laughed like the joke they'd always been waiting for me to tell. Their eyes lit up like, oh, you finally remember. And I said, bubblegum pop, neck roll, eyes like dice, yeah, girl. And sassiness became me. Interchangeable, which came first, the black girl or her sass? Never mind that they were always meant to be together. I knew that this was who I was now, even if it wasn't. I'm meant to embody this body, but nobody's home some days. I get tired. But bubblegum pop, neck roll, eyes like dice, can't get tired. I was ordained long before I was born. This is the way this body can exist. I feel like minstrels show their snaps cut like the click of a coin in a donation cup. The only black people they know are tokens, tossing me scraps of validation like saying, I'll give you approval, but you have to jive for it. I'll give you humanity, but you have to cry for it. And I make things easier for this body when I say it. Save it, I think, or maybe I just elongate my own oppression. Sorry, never mind that. Watch me, bubblegum pop. I want to tell them sassy is angry light, the kind that can be commodified, sold like a board game. Let their gaze toss me around like a loaded set and watch my neck roll. Oh, sorry about that. And watch the nape land on less than I deserve. That's why they I watch my neck roll, eyes like dice, entertaining enough to blow me up with hot air until I deflate. That's how they make my bubblegum pop. I want to tell them, don't tell me, let the beast out, because I'm not something to be domesticated. This sassiness is restraint, not something you pet when the curls pop out. I want to tell them, I don't think this body used to be this way. I think maybe it lived inside myself. I think there's another voice in here, but I can only hear her sometimes like an echo rattling in my chest. I think she liked it quiet, wrapped herself in the words she didn't need to say, but nobody clapped for her, so she didn't exist. So I had to exist. If I didn't, yeah, girl, would I even exist? And I want to say something, anything else. But everything I say comes out as bubblegum pop, neck roll, eyes like dice. Yes, girl. And every time it does, their eyes light up like, don't forget again. So that was My Sassiness Speaks. A little more physical, a little more slammy. What are some things you feel like you noticed in terms of body language, if you want to share? You can also chat if you don't feel like speaking out loud.
First thing I definitely noticed, and that's so wonderful just about the way you perform, is like your tone perfectly mirrors what you're doing with your body. The way like you say the word like shows up in the way you present yourself. You know, we can see how you feel.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I've been told I am expressive, just in general, just in life. So that is definitely helpful. I think something that body language is actually good for is actually aiding in that. You know what I'm saying? It's very hard to be unexpressive when you're like doing everything with your hands or your body. It's really hard to just be blah while you're moving all over the place. So I think that that's something that moving your body a little bit can help. And at a lot of points, mine was a little more choreographed or more kind of thought out with intentionality. But like I mentioned, body language doesn't necessarily have to be that. It doesn't necessarily have to be all over the place. Even like McPherson in his poem, you see him like moving his arms and everything crazy. Does not have to be like that at all. You can make it what it wants to be. And most importantly, the most important thing to think about when you're thinking about movement is that make it work for you. So if that's not who you are, if you're not everything out here, make it work for you. Maybe you're more understated. Maybe you're a little more chill. Maybe you can sit with it a little more. And the other thing to think about is how, on the flip side, a lack of movement can also work for you. I know that I did a poem once, and it was a little bit more about conformity. So my movements were a lot stiffer. They were a lot more robotic. It was kind of all very much here. And that's another thing, that it's still you being intentional with your body, but on the flip side, because if you're not moving at all, people are also going to notice that. It's a choice. So I think that whatever you do, just do it, you know? So with that in mind, I want to have you guys try a little bit of body movement. I know we all wrote a little bit. We all wrote something down at all. So I want to go ahead and have you guys try and use what you just wrote to practice a little bit of body movement. I know folks have their camera off, but if we are wanting to enrolling, I would say we could turn our cameras on and our sound off. Maybe a little trade-off for that if anybody is comfortable with that. If not, again, totally fine. But for folks who want to keep their cameras on, what I want to welcome you to do is just spend about 5 to 7 minutes. And this time I'm not going to play any music because you guys are going to be trying to recite. You can stand, you can sit, whatever feels comfortable with you. And I want you to get comfortable with performing your poem as if there were people here, because technically they're just on a Zoom. So imagine what it would be like to perform this poem. You can keep your sound off, so we don't even want to hear what you're saying, so no one will have any idea what you're saying, but just try to recite it and try to think of what might work for you and what might work for your poem, in terms of what you're doing with your body. See if you can be a little bit more aware of what your body is doing as you read and recite your poem. So it is currently 6 p.m. on the dot. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 to 7 minutes. Turn off your sound, turn on your camera if you're willing, and go ahead and try and recite the poem that you just wrote. All right, amazing. We're gonna call that time on that. How did that feel for folks? It was really exciting for me watching these silent movies almost. And I was like, wow, these poems are great. I haven't even heard them, but I can just tell by the way you're moving. So what did it feel like? What did you maybe find? What do you think maybe changed or stayed the same as you were kind of exploring reciting your poem using your body?
I definitely noticed how much I actually don't use my body language when I talk, or at least when I recite my poems. I kind of, I don't know what I do. I guess I have like those little idle animations and I like sway and stuff. But I kind of use more of like facial expressions rather than my body language. And it's probably just because I don't talk in my body language much. But yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I completely get you. I am a nervous swayer. I will tell you, like, when I would try to do stuff, especially in the beginning, the note was always like, stop swaying, like stop moving, because I would do a lot with my hands, but a lot of times your legs have to stay planted because there's a mic in front of you. So swaying was a big thing for me. So that is definitely something that is relatable. And I also think that facial expressions, they are part of your body. They count as that body language, you know. It's still you moving yourself to be expressive, to convey meaning. So I think that that's actually really beneficial. And I think it's really, really powerful too, because it would be just kind of awkward if you were talking every day or just reciting a poem and your face was always just like this and you were not at all interested in what you were saying. See, even just the lack of movement in that, it sometimes informs just the way that you speak. Any other folks that found anything, felt anything, disliked it, discomfort, joy, anything in between?
I'll say something about mine. I personally am very expressive with my face. And when I read my poem, I just naturally would express it with my hands like you, and also with my face and my voice. So that's my style, I guess, and as as a communicator. So yeah, it's totally different than Maya. I use my body, more often when I'm speaking.
Definitely. That's real. That's real. And I think even just having you take a moment to think about that, then you'll be like talking with your hands and you're like, wait, what am I doing? What am I saying? What does this even mean? So having that awareness is interesting to sit with, because you live within your body always. Does anyone, after doing that exercise, feel like they want to share a little bit? Or are we still tentative?
I'm okay to share.
Yay!
Yay, Maya.
Your smile is the sun, so bright it's drying out my eyes. I know I should look away, but I can't, because your smile is warm. It's hot chocolate on a cold day. It's comforting me in times of need. It's holding me while I sleep. Your smile is a ball of fire, burning me, leaving me with third degree burns, with scars and pain so bad that no one else can touch me. Your smile is dying, like every star does. It shines so bright, it makes so many warm. It burns one last time. Your smile is exploding, leaving behind a cosmic light show, letting everyone around it know that it's gone. Your smile is a black hole, swallowing the stars and leaving the planets that depend on them cold and lifeless, leaving so many no place to call home. Your smile is lost, forever a part of the space-time continuum, never to be a source of life again. Your smile was the sun in my solar system, but now I'm cold and I have no place to call home.
Beautiful.
Yes, snaps, claps, all of that. That was
Yeah.
amazing. Maya, thank
Awesome.
you so much for sharing that. That was so amazing.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny? I noticed, because I remember earlier you were like, I tried to kind of do the extended metaphor, and then I kind of switched, but I stayed on theme, and like I could see the switch, and it like still worked really well. And like also like you kept with the extended metaphor for like quite a bit. So I don't know what you mean you can't do metaphors, because you were doing the metaphors. It was really, really good. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
That. Yes, thank you. Does anybody else feel like sharing?
Tanisha?
I'm sorry?
I was pointing to Tanisha.
No, ma'am.
Tabitha?
I have someone actually who messaged their poem and requests that I share it anonymously, which I'm happy to do.
Okay.
So this is an anonymous poem that I am going to read aloud. I planted a garden. It was full of sprouts, grew with water, grew with sunlight, was full of bloom. So many colors, so many shapes. Then the weeds came in. Well, aren't they pretty too? So many colors, so many shapes. They grew with water, grew with sun, just like my seeds. Grew until they covered everything, strangled, stole the water. Maybe weeds aren't flowers I want in my garden. Nice. That was really, really good. I really liked that. I think that the garden imagery, I really liked it. And I like that there was a lot there, right? So it was the garden, but within the garden you had sprouts, you could see the sunlight, and there were the weeds and everything. So just really like living within that garden. So I really, really enjoyed that one. Thank you so much, anonymous sharer, for sharing that with all of us. Any other folks feeling bold? No worries. That's totally fine. Thank you so much for the folks that shared and to the folks that didn't. I hope you guys continue to expound upon either what you wrote or just metaphors in general, even if you aren't particularly happy with the extended metaphor that you worked with now, or you might not feel like you want to use it or explore it anymore. I hope that you guys do take that kind of device of extended metaphors with y'all. So I am going to, before I move forward, before I share a few more of my poems, any other questions, comments, anything else, either in the chat or you want to bring into the space verbally? Awesome. So for this last little bit of the session, I'm going to share a few more poems before you guys get sick of my voice, and then we will let you guys go. So the first couple ones I want to share with you, I'm going to share screen again, and just going to give you a little bit of background on them. So these poems are called Contrapuntal Poems, and what those are, they're basically they're a poem made up of two poems, in a sense, a little bit meta, a little bit Inception. It's very much two poems, and I was really exposed to this genre of poetry and writing poetry when Tyehimba Just actually had come to Ball State, and he performed for us. Tyehimba Just, if you don't know him, he's a really amazing Black poet. He has this book of poetry called Olio. I recommend you guys check it out if you're into written poetry. And so he came, and we had read some of his poems in my poetry class. But what really strikes me is that technically you can write contrapuntal poems in a few different ways. He writes his poems side by side. And the interesting thing about them is you can read one, you can read the other, you can read them across together. And he was reading his poems, and we did it in class. And there was this one poem, and then he just started reading it backwards. And I was like, whoa, that is wild. And I am definitely, that is not this poem. You cannot read it backwards. But these next couple of poems are in that style where you can read one column as one poem, you can read one column as another poem, or you can read it across all the way. So I'm gonna share my screen so you guys can see what that actually looks like. So the first one that I'm going to share with you guys is called Cleopatra Suite 4, The Escape. And the left side in the italicized middle, so all of the italicized parts, is actually lyrics. So I don't know, you might have heard Frank Ocean's Pyramids, but it is a portion of the lyrics from that. And then the non-italicized portions are my words. And I thought that they fit really, really well together. So I'm going to read left. I'm going to read left with the italicized. I'm going to read right with the non-italicized, and then I'm going to read all the way through so you can see how that works. They have taken Cleopatra. Run, run, run. Come back for my glory. Bring her back to me. Run, run, run. The crown of our pharaoh, the throne of our queen is empty. And yet I have taken myself back. I leave behind no legacy for them to legitimize. Even now they look for the Black Queen, they say, as the hieroglyphic of respectability, singing my praises with a mummified larynx, but Cleopatra isn't even my name. They have taken Cleopatra, and yet I have taken myself back. I run, 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 come back for my glory. Leave behind no legacy for them to legitimize. Even now, they look for the Black Queen. Bring her back to me, they say, as the hieroglyphic of respectability. Run, run, run. The crown of our pharaoh, singing my praises with a mummified larynx. But the throne of our queen is empty. Cleopatra isn't even my name. So that is how contrapuntal poems can work. Sometimes they're just read one side, sometimes the other, sometimes both. But I really like playing with that genre, and writing them is a little bit like almost a Sudoku, because a lot of times you might find that you can make one side work, you can make the other side work, or you can make it all work. But then when you try to break it down to one or the other all together, you're like, this doesn't make sense. So it really is a little bit like a Sudoku to try and piece it together a little bit, but it's a fun challenge. The second one that is written in this style is called Talking to My Voice Teacher About My Hair, a Conversation. And the left is actually something that my collegiate voice teacher did say to me, and then the right is kind of the response that I had. Talking to my voice teacher about my hair, a conversation. Your hair doesn't grow like mine does. I know, because I had a Black roommate in college. She told me that. Your hair doesn't amaze me with its texture, like a hidden forest. I've grown my lush greenery since birth, tufts of hair sticking up like cotton candy, sugary mimicry of the clouds, just like my Black roommate who spends hours tending her garden. You will never understand how magic is made. Your hair doesn't grow. Your hair doesn't amaze me with its texture like mine does, like a hidden forest. I know, because I've grown my lush greenery since birth. I had tufts of hair sticking up like cotton candy, a sugary mimicry of the clouds, just like my Black roommate in college, who spends hours tending her garden. She told me that you will never understand how magic is made. So that is my two contrapuntal poems, a little more written through. Let's see, what shall I do next? All right, so the next work that I'm gonna do for you, let me change my view, exit full screen, amazing, so I can see y'all again, perfect. So the next one that I'm gonna do is also one that is technically a bit more written. There's this poet, you may know him, you may not. His name is Hanif Abdurraqib. He is amazing. Poet, cultural critic, everything in between, all around extravaganza of a human being. He wrote an amazing series called The Crown Ain't Worth Much. And he came to Ball State also, and he did another workshop with us. And something that's really interesting about Hanif is that because he's a cultural critic, a lot of his work sometimes revolves around pop culture, things that are interesting to us. So he gave us a prompt, and it was about music. Because there's so much overlap between poetry and music is poetry, and poetry is music. When you do it, it's all overlapping and intertwining. And it was a prompt where you were to take a song and you were to write your own poetic translation of it. And if you know me, you know that I love Beyonce. I love Beyonce, and Lemonade is probably the closest we have to modern musical genius. So one of her songs on there I really, really loved, and this was like back when it had like came out pretty recently, and I loved Don't Hurt Yourself. I was like, yes, I love this song. It's so like hype, it's so angry. But something interesting happened when I was actually writing the poem side by side, the translation, is that I thought to myself, I was like, actually, this poem feels kind of sad to me. And that's something that I found interesting. And so I've enjoyed doing a few of these kind of poetic covers, but this was kind of the one that popped it off. So this is called A Poet Covers Beyonce's Don't Hurt Yourself. Love me. I ain't just some chick or a fat-handed handle for an open palm. You know I don't want to leave. Look, now you got me mad. I ain't no average bitch. Don't talk to me about who you married. You married tumultuous gravel, an alchemist's burial ground. I mold myself, made myself. Who the fuck do you think I is? This is the dull knife, empty threat. If I shout ugly enough, pretend to take me serious. I wonder who I was before you made me this. Scorn with no malice, hurt without disappointment. Watch me play Jenga with baseball bats. Pretend it's the framework of our home. Light candle with tongue. This isn't what I meant when I said love me lights out. Hey, operator, send help for the man who knows what he's got and don't care. Let it be. I try to. Let it be. But baby, what do you lose from loving me? If I could hang memories in your mind, would you come home on time? Hey baby, have you ever heard the way I toughen my tongue or tasted the words I trace across the roof of your mouth? Is that how you hear me? Hear me, I'm screaming. Love me, I mean that. Don't make me unload the gun or helicopter my cornrows. Hot air fills the garage enough to mistake it for gas. Strike our flame or stick out my tongue. Pretend my tears are your blood. I'll make it rain. Don't call my bluff. Love me or let it be. So that was A Poet Covers Don't Hurt Yourself. The next one that I have for y'all is called Origin Story. 1. I was born by way of God lighting the ocean on fire, was birthed when the flames broke the water between the waves of my mother's pain, too soon too. The tendrils of the kraken they called umbilical cord tried to cocoon me from broken cradles, for when the vow breaks, Infernal held calloused hands above her womb and wrecked our ship, called it telekinesis, called it deliverance. So the kraken let me go, so they couldn't cut me out of her coral reef and call me a C-section. 3. The charred remains of the crests embedded themselves in my curls, and that's why, when I wash my hair, I can still smell the burnt sorrow of the horizon. Shower steam rising like burn incense, like burnt common sense, like the reason I don't have the common sense to do anything except burn. The next poem I have for you is called Peter Pan Complex. Keeping with the lesson of tonight, it is also an extended metaphor poem. This is called Peter Pan Complex, Neverland. I'll be your mother, says Wendy to Peter, says wifey material, mom friend ready to raise grown-ass men. This is her way into paradise not promised to her. You can't be a lost boy if you have nothing to lose. She wears her mother's dress like legacy, too long, too heavy, but drapes herself in it anyways, tells her brothers stories of a place where kids never have to grow up, but she has never been kid, has always been young lady. She never questioned how old Peter must be to play forever like a pan flute. She thought her youth could be the same, never realized going where no boys grew up meant that she immediately would. We don't need her, says Tinkerbell to Peter, says jealous bitch, green with envy. Funny how magic becomes envy when someone is jealous of that power. They looked at her like she was an inch tall, eyes glazed over. Her words were just wind chimes to them. They swatted her like a bug when she'd fly. Her fairy of tools. Her magic is to fix. So she placed boys will be boys over bruises. She's tinkered with Peter since he was young enough to still be young, gave him everything he'd asked for, make me a place to feel both safe and alive. So she kept him safe, adored him into eternal immaturity, protected all the little boys who couldn't bear to grow up in a world that would turn them man before they knew what it meant. This was the way she knew how to love him, the way she could bear to raise her boys, hoped they'd be less lost when they fell short, when she'd built them a safe place to land. I hate you, says Wendy, says Tinkerbell, and they mean themselves, because they live the same way, orbiting a sun that doesn't belong to them. It's easier to chase a shadow than stand in one, because the shadow's always easier to catch than the boy who casts it. And all the while, the boys traipse across the paradise found, make a motto out of masculinity, curl into it like home. As the girls look on and call them carefree, because the girls care so much for their freedom, they pretend it belongs to them. And Peter never grows up, and our boys stay lost, and our girls never land.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, do you have one more, or are you?
I am flexible. I come prepped, so
Okay.
I have one more if we need it, but if we want to close, we can absolutely do that as well.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close.
Amazing.
But thank you so much, Sierra, for all your help and your support. I've really enjoyed this program, and your poetry is awesome. I just want to remind everybody to invite someone to next week's program. We'll be back here at 5 o'clock until 6:30. Also, just another shout out for the book, African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song by Kevin Young. Thank you all for attending. You all have a great night.
Thank you.